Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Decode Strategy live stream. This is the Asia's hottest online classroom for marketing professionals from marketing professionals. In fact, it started off as an Asia's online marketing classroom, and now it's turning into a global marketing classroom. I've got increasing number of speakers who are spread all over the world. So, firstly, thank you to everyone who's joining us live. And thanks to everyone who's registered for the event and who probably couldn't manage to join us live, but will be watching the video, the recording of the video later. So thanks to everyone. A little bit about Decode Strategy Labs, which is my company, which I started last year. A little bit of introduction about myself and my company. So there are two parts to the business. One is a consulting side of business where I work directly with brands. And the other side of the business is the marketing academy, where I have an online course where I create a lot of content, which you might have seen on my YouTube channel. And then I also run this live stream as a part of that marketing academy. And you can check out my course on strategic marketing on my website. The details are there in the description to the event. And there are some really good events that I'm lining up. There's one which is already confirmed, and this one is with Andrea. She'll be joining us from Barcelona, but she works in London, and she's a global brand director at Reckitt. And she'll be talking about some really amazing work that she had done when she was in Latin America, where it was all around creating a positive social impact and business growth through purpose. So there are some rich learnings from this session. And if you're interested, you should absolutely follow the Decode Strategy Labs LinkedIn page, where I don't make too many unwanted announcements. I just keep updating all the event announcements which are there. So if you want to stay updated, you can either follow the Decode Strategy Labs LinkedIn page. Alternatively, and what I would strongly suggest is that you can also follow the YouTube channel. It's called Business of Marketing. And not only the live events, but also the recordings of all previous events are there on this page. And if you like any of the events, just spread the word, spread it, like share it with people, your friends, your colleagues on WhatsApp, LinkedIn, wherever you feel like. And if you have a speaker or a topic in mind, and you want to share that with me, or if you have a topic that you would like to come and talk about on this platform and you think it would be relevant for a platform like this, please reach out to me. My email is hello@decodestrategy.com. And on that note, let's move on to today's speaker. And I've got Dan White joining me for today's event. And he'll be talking about soft skills needn't be hard to master. And if you want to master them, this is the event, this is the session where you need to be. So let me just add Dan to the live stream first, and then we'll continue from there. Hello, Dan. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Ro. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. So you have the great honor of being the first speaker who's making a second appearance on my show. So I'm extremely thankful for accepting my invitation. And it's lovely to see your second book come out. And, I would love to know all about it, and I would love to share all about it, especially after the previous book where we saw a lot of success. We saw a tremendous amount of people who had joined that event. There were almost like 500, 600 people who were watching that event live. And, even the YouTube video I just checked has over 300 odd views. So that was a huge success story. And I wanted the audience to be aware of what you've been up to. So maybe before we start with the content that you're planning to share today, how about you do a quick recap, because there are lots of new people. So maybe a little bit of introduction about yourself, about your first book and your second book, and then you can move on to the topic for today.
Great. Thanks, Raul. Appreciate that. You might, don't know if you can tell, but I'm not at home. I'm in a room. I'm actually staying in Jesus College in Cambridge for a day or so. And I've got to tell you, I've got this amazing view. I have this huge window. I'm going to share it with you now. I hope this works, because it's a beautiful old building. I'll just hang on a second, see if this works, Raul.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, that's
Can you see?
lovely.
Okay.
Wow, that's
Can you
lovely.
see? It's a lovely old college, one of the old and rich colleges of Cambridge. So it's a lovely place to be. And more importantly, the internet connection, the Wi-Fi connection is nice and strong. So hopefully, fingers crossed, tempting fate.
Lovely, lovely.
Okay, so what I'll do, I'll share my screen now so I can show you some slides.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Is that all working there?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so yes, it is my second book. It's the soft skills book. It's not even out yet, but it is available for pre-order from Amazon and Book Depository. So I'm hoping you'll be enticed a little bit by some of the key frameworks that I'm going to be sharing from the book today. Yes, like you say, you've got a lot of new subscribers, so I'll just do a very brief recap on who I am. My background is very much in market research and then later in marketing. In the area of both a practitioner in those areas, but also sort of a thought leader and innovator in those areas. But what started, I guess, as a hobby has now become a huge part of my working life, which is visualizing business concepts and then writing about them, speaking about them, and using them in my training as well. So that's kind of what I spend a big chunk of my time, my life doing these days. In fact, it's my second book, but the two books were always planned in parallel. Hope you can tell by the branding, the color scheme that I use. I already had the other color in mind.
Right.
So yeah, the idea behind this is that I'm a firm believer that if you want to succeed in any career, you're going to need to build both your technical skills, whatever chosen specialism or area you decided to go into, but also at the same time your soft skills. Yeah, so I can't think of many very successful senior people in organizations that haven't developed both of those, at least to a strong extent. That's kind of the idea. So obviously for a marketing professional, then these two are kind of yin and yang. They go together, they complement each other. But the soft skills book is kind of more broadly relevant, I guess I'd say anyone in professional services, professional businesses.
Right.
So onto the book, just to give you an idea of what's in there. So the first 5 chapters are about, kind of handling, managing yourself and handling other people, and then also running and inspiring teams and running projects. And these are kind of things I would say you definitely need to master in your earlier parts of your career. And then later on in your career, I think what becomes even more important is the ability to communicate your ideas, to present them, to be persuasive, to bring other people on board, and etc. Ultimately culminating in maybe big pitches, for example, which comes at the end. So it gives you a flavour of what's in the book. But enough of the sort of advertising. Now let's get on with the sort of the more interesting stuff. So I've come along preparing 10 different topics to talk about, and you can see them on the screen now. I'll go through them in order, and we'll see how many we've got time for. I'm hoping we'll get through about 7 or 8, maybe more, depending.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be quite a good idea, Raoul, if people, if they want to, that is, they can use the comment box and put in a number of any that they particularly would love it if we had time for, and then we can reprioritize as we go along if one of those crops up a lot.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to switch the format a little bit this time around. And if the viewers who are listening, or watching, if there is a particular framework out of this list of 10 that you really, really want to be covered, then just drop the number in the comments box. And we would also love to know where you're logging in from, because I saw people from 20 plus countries who had registered for the event. So drop the number that you definitely want to be covered in today's session, and we'll try to cover all of them, but just in case we start running out of time, then we'll prioritize accordingly. And also, I think last time what we had done, Dan, was that we waited for the questions all the way to the end. And I think it became a little difficult because the frameworks that you had covered in that session were pretty wide in their scope. So it was not a singular topic. It was like 10 different topics in a way that you had covered. So what we can probably do for today's session is that Anyone who's watching, if there is a question or a comment that comes to your mind, the moment you see the framework being shared, just type in immediately, whether you're watching it on YouTube or on LinkedIn, just type in the question that you have in your mind immediately, and we'll try and cover questions as we go. So, so let's see how we go with this format. I think there's a little bit of delay between people putting in their questions and us getting to see them over here on our studio. But we'll try and work around with that, and we'll see how it works smoothly or not.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, well, in the meantime,
yeah,
I'll just get cracking with the first one, right?
Awesome. Yes.
Okay, cool. Now, this one I think is fundamentally important because it's about dealing with different people, other people, and what could be more important in almost any profession, but actually collaborating. So I thought I'd start with this one. Now, I've come across at least 5, 6, maybe more different frameworks and approaches for understanding personalities. And I've generally, I mean, they vary in complexity. Some which split people, or at least have 4 categories, let's call it. Some got to like 32 or even more. And I've found them all fascinating. I mean, they're all very interesting, and you reflect on them, don't you, when you do these kind of evaluations of yourself, kind of thing. But I have also struggled a bit with how useful they are in a business context. Actually using them to help you do a better job. So what I've spent a lot of time actually thinking about how to distill this into something that's very actionable. So, well, I'll show you the overall sort of initial framework, and it'll probably be very familiar to you. I'm sure it will to many people. It's the idea that there are, well, at the most basic level, there are probably about 4, let's call them tendencies, personality tendencies. Yeah. So what it means is that people often have a preference. They lean towards one of them a bit more than others quite often. That's quite common. Or at least they have that tendency more often in their life, or more occasions. So the way I've summarized it is, there are people who like to get it right, absolutely precise and accurate and robust. There are people who really want to focus on getting it done, getting on with it, getting it accomplished. There's also people who have a tendency for getting somewhere new, learning something. I'm just fascinated with ideas and development, and I'm very much in that area, as those who know me can tell. And then there are others who are very interested in people and harmony and getting people getting on well and collaborating really, really well. And you can see immediately, these are all very valuable for business. All of these are essential for successful businesses and teams. But we know that some people with one tendency don't often get on well with others. So, okay, that's all very well. But in the book, it helps you, gives you ideas about how to spot people with these tendencies. But the bit I'm most proud about is this grid. Okay, so this is a grid which I use myself. I use this, and I've been using this myself for about 10 years now, as I've been building the framework for me. And that is, for example, let me just go through this. So, for example, if you're working with someone who likes to get it done, then a good way to persuade them is by talking about end results. Okay? I'm going to go diagonally down the column. If you're talking to someone who likes to get it right, and you need to reassure them about doing something, a strategy, whatever, then the best thing to do is show them the evidence, etc., etc. So getting somewhere, if you're dealing with someone like me who likes to get somewhere new, then it's always good to provide these people with possibilities, what could happen, exciting possibilities. And I'm getting on well. For example, it's very important in meetings with people to make sure that they're happy in that meeting, that there's a lot of discussion. There's plenty of time to discuss and air thoughts. And I can't go through the whole grid, but I use this as a lookup table. So I'm hoping people will find that extremely useful.
Wonderful. This is actually quite useful, Dan. And I can already see I can visualize people with the 4 different tendencies that you've shown over here.
Good.
And although not directly as a framework, but I have used similar approaches when I'm dealing with the different tendencies, the different people with the different kinds of tendencies. So I can totally relate to this.
People do. People, when you start talking about this kind of concept, people can usually nod and go, "Oh yeah, I know people who are more like that." You can. I always have people in my mind when I'm thinking about some of these who are very strong, very clearly in one area, have one tendency more than another. Actually, interestingly, my son, he's the reason I'm here today. Actually, I'm helping him move flat, as it happens. He edited the whole book brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly, and this is his favourite insight, his favourite framework from the whole book. He said this is really useful. So he's already kind of got this kind of thinking in mind when he's dealing with his colleagues, etc. So yeah. So that's the last on this section. Have any questions come up at all, Rahul?
There's one question which I wanted to ask, and my question was more about, like, when you are trying to understand personality. Obviously, you've dropped a couple of tips on how exactly should you go about when you're trying to identify a person and the tendency that seems to be the dominant tendency. But what happens in a situation where there are multiple tendencies or more than one tendencies? And is there any word of advice that you have for such situations?
I mean, obviously it gets difficult. I mean, to be honest, the more you get to know someone, if you have the opportunity to get to know someone, and if you've got good listening skills and have a good relationship with them, you start to learn actually what they care about and what they prioritize in life. And the book does talk in more detail, not just about these tendencies, but more importantly, actually, is individuals' personal motivations, which is very important when you're working with someone for years and you're in a team with them. And if you've got a good relationship, you've got the chance to understand them properly, and then you don't really need this sort of this is more for before you've got there, or you don't know them as well as you could, or in the early days of a relationship. And of course, as you say, it's not helpful if they don't have any particularly clear tendency. If some people are in the middle, some do. So it wouldn't be that helpful, this framework. It's more about getting to know them.
Wonderful. So there's already a request from Alec, and he's asking that we start from the end. He's asked for the last framework.
Oh, I see. Okay.
To be prioritized. So if you want to jump all the way to the end, and
I will. I'll tell you what, it's the one I'm most nervous about, but let me be brave. That's probably why I put it number 10. I will indeed jump to that one. Okay.
Okay, let's do that.
What's the quickest way to do this?
I'll probably remove your PowerPoint from the screen for 2 seconds, and you can flip
that would be brilliant. Thank you for doing that. It'll be cleaner that way. That's for sure.
Yeah, you can do the dirty work in the background.
Yeah. Okay, I'm ready.
Wonderful. So your slides are back up, and let's go.
Okay, great. So yeah, the reason actually I put this at the end, truthfully, is that I thought this used to be more pertinent at a time when people did a lot of traveling abroad and actually meeting different countries face to face and maybe staying with, where it becomes very important to get to understand about how to work in that environment, if you like, in that business environment. But I'm hoping, yes, but let's be positive. Let's hope that business travel like that will come back as soon as possible. Let's talk about this. I think one of the most valuable things to know about working with different cultures is just understanding the different ways in which cultures can and do vary. So here's a checklist, and in the book I go through each of these areas, talking about the kinds of differences and the implications and what you could do. Okay, so for example, voice and language. Obviously, language is a potential obstacle or something to be very mindful of, and make sure that people are happy to speak in the same language, or you have interpreters if necessary. But even you got to remember, even when you're speaking the same language, it may be used in a different way from the way you're used to. So the example I give in the book is that when someone says yes, okay, it depends. If they're from different cultures and maybe that's not their first language, yes can mean quite different things in different cultures. Yes, in some countries can mean definitely. So yes, and for example, in the US, yes means yes.
Yeah.
Yes means the same as it does in the UK. It's quite different. Yes, in some countries can mean I'll consider it. So yes, as in I'm taking it on board. And I'm considering it. I'm not rejecting it. So I think it's important to know that even some of those subtleties are really, really important, so you don't get the wrong end of the stick. He says usually. Okay. Body language can vary a lot by countries, and it's just being aware that it can be very different from your own. You know, some of the Latin cultures are much more expressive with their body. I'm quite expressive with my body. I use a lot of hand gestures, etc. Others can be in some cultures it's more common to be more reserved, you know, and less animated. But don't misinterpret that as lack of enthusiasm. It's not necessarily lack of enthusiasm at all. So just being aware. Things like conflict. In some countries, conflict is better aired. You know, it's expected it to be brought out in the open and discussed there and then. In some countries, that would be very bad form indeed. That would be inappropriate, and conflict should be handled privately, potentially even through writing rather than face-to-face verbal conflict.
Right.
I won't go through all of these, but you can see that's the kind of the thing that's important to know. And you know, things like timings. There's a phrase I come across when I was researching this called African time. Well, what does African time mean? It doesn't mean time zones or anything. It kind of means don't expect the meeting to start when you think it's going to start, or end when you think it's going to end. You know, and so if you're working with an African team for the first time, and you come from I don't want to pick out any one country, but Germany came to mind. You've got to be aware that to be more flexible than you're used to. Let's say.
Right. Okay. In fact, that reminds me of, you know, Indian Standard Time, which is supposed to be like the acronym is supposed to be IST, and a lot of times we used to joke that it's actually Indian Stretchable Time instead of.
There you go. Yeah, that's another good example. I haven't heard of that one. Thanks for that. That's great. In terms of dress code and body, that's important. If you're visiting a country, I like to summarize this as a picture of a person, a body, because so many of the faux pas that you might make relates to the body. So be very careful. I mean, I almost don't want to do it on an international audience like this. I was going to illustrate that with making these hand gestures, but I'm not going to, because you can read them there on the top right. Those things can mean completely different things in different countries, and sometimes some of those gestures are extremely rude, whereas in your country they might be extremely positive. So I would say just be very careful with any kind of hand gesture at all. Okay.
Right.
And then there are other things like feet, you know, how exposing your feet or showing the soles of your feet, or putting your feet up. So putting your feet up on the table, which I have seen people do in business meetings before, in a very kind of arrogant way, would be an absolute, you know, really, really very bad form in some cases, etc. So I added this as a slightly humorous, but actually very important awareness reminder. And my advice, I was always like, it only takes about 15, 20 minutes on the internet looking up some cultural specific things about the country you're visiting before you go, and you should always do that, I think.
Right.
Okay, well, hopefully that answers that request.
Yeah. So there are two questions which are kind of not squarely on the two frameworks that you have already shared, but they are somewhere in the periphery. So maybe we take on those questions now. So the first one is that, it's from Suvida. Could you please tell how to navigate toxic work environment amongst teams, and could you throw some light on that, please? So that's slightly on the periphery, but if you want to elaborate, that would be great.
Yes, actually, what would be handy for me, if we go to the team section, I'll go to the team section, and then I'll follow that up with some thoughts on, therefore, what to do if you're not in that nice situation and actually a toxic team. But actually, just looking at what a good practice is for a team can be helpful as a sort of a benchmark of what you need to do to get there. So
let's take that as the next framework, or the next section that we cover.
I will guess the slide number. Here we go.
Okay. So I've removed your PowerPoint once again, and you can do the dirty work in the back.
I will do that now. Thank you very much. Okay, yes. So we'll start with what a great team looks like, and then we'll move on to I'll try and think of some ways to help with a toxic team.
Yeah.
So now this takes me back actually to, I guess I think it was in about my mid-30s, I guess, and I'd never managed a team of more than about 4 or 5 people, so not really a team, just a small unit, small group of people. But I was asked to take on the management, the leading of a team of over 50. Obviously it's a really daunting thing, and I'd never really had to be consciously thinking about what makes a great team. But this had to be a great team because it was such a big, important team for the company. So obviously this is when I started to develop this thinking and do a lot of research on it. And I've kind of, I guess I've distilled this into the thought that an effective team has these 4 components to it that are well defined. That's the key thing. They're well defined and known by the team. And obviously, there's goals. Every team needs to have a clear set of written down specific goals that they want to achieve. Ideally, eventually, but also importantly, each year, or each time framework. So goals. Then rules. So these are like rules of engagement. I mean, they can be very boring things, very admin type things, like you must complete your timesheet every week by the end of the next Monday or whatever. Just specific things you have to do to function as a team and work together. Roles means everyone clearly knows what their role is, and how it interacts, how it relates to other team members. And actually, I've noticed in problematic teams in the past, one of the big problems is the roles aren't clearly defined, so it's unclear when a task comes up who should do it. And I view that problem that more than one person really wants to do it and fights in some way has a conflict to get that, or the other way around, doesn't want to do it and thinks the other person should. So being really clear, and so that no one really has to ask, or there should be a system for clarification. But the point is, everyone knows what they're doing and how it all connects together, real clear clarity. And then also, I think values are actually increasingly, especially important. And these aren't life values. They aren't values about morals values. They're values relating, obviously, to the team. And I picked out some examples of things I mean. Things like, that everyone expects everyone to help create an inclusive environment. That could be a written down value that this team has to signs up to when they join, effectively, which is important, really important. And in fact, that's the kind of thing, some people call it a team charter, where you get together and you agree as a set of people, guided by the leader, but not driven by, so not completely, not laid down by. The values are. Another value might be, we will always be looking for ways to improve the way the team works. Or the quality of our output, or whatever. That might be another value that you all agree to share. Or it might be, that it's important that we always make decisions based on our team objectives, our goals. That's how we make decisions. Well, will it help towards our team objectives, or will it not? Those are the kind of things that can be in values. So I guess, back to the question there, I would say, if you've got a toxic team, try and make sure that these 4 things are clear, and then make sure that your team has hopefully contributed to shaping these things as well. And then use that as we say in English, the yardstick that you can, the shared, the thing you could point to and say, but what your behavior here, or what you did yesterday, is against our rules, or it's not reflecting our values, or isn't your responsibility, your role, etc. So it might take a bit of work to lay these things down, and it's hard work to go from a toxic team to a good team, but it is possible. And it usually means, and I haven't come prepared to talk about this one, but there's a section in my book about handling difficult conversations, and another one about handling conflict, and you'll need both of those techniques as well. Now, I think I've got a bonus slide here, Raoul. In this section, I snuck in a few extras. Because I thought it was a nice metaphor and a pretty picture. In terms of team roles, I think a strong team needs to have at least one person who can do each of these things. It could be the same person doing more than one of these things, or it could be several people doing one, but these all need to be reflected. And for example, you see the direction in the middle going up to belief at the top there. You need someone who's going to have direction and belief, but belief we can do this as a team. Belief is a good thing to do, and an interesting thing to do, a fun thing to do. And often those two, they can be the same person, not always. They're often the leader, not always, although direction almost always has to come from the leader, really. But, And then you have all these other roles, and you can see how these relate quite closely, actually, to the personality kind of preferences that people tend to have or can have. So in a team, you need people who are good at figuring things out practically. Rigor, you need the rigor to make sure that you're doing the right thing and you're doing it accurately and correctly. You need ideas and inspiration, which is where I usually came in, hopefully. And also, something you do need a bit of provocation. Someone who will just challenge you and everyone, challenge the thinking in an appropriate way. And you also need clarity and harmony, so that the whole flower doesn't fall over. If you see what I mean, harmony that means that it stays together. So, any other questions come up, Rahul?
Yes, there's one more question, and this one is that sometimes there is a mood-induced obsessive need to get it right that becomes unproductive. How can we motivate such individuals who become obsessive around getting things right? Yeah,
that's interesting. Well, I think that's about roles. Kind of. I tended to find if someone had obsessive attention to detail and needing to get things perfect, I'll give them the role actually of checking and challenging when a decision's been made, for example. I'm not sure I can answer the question in terms of someone who is supposed to be doing a routine thing and does it too much.
I think if I can guess what the question actually means is that probably sometimes people who have that perfectionist syndrome, to the extent that they don't really end up meeting the deadlines and things like that. How is there any thoughts that you have on how to deal with such kind of team members?
I've had it before. I'm just trying to think of the best ways one can deal with it. I think actually that there's the having important conversations technique, which I can bluff my way through. I can find it in my book over here. Essentially, a technique where you raise a challenge, you raise a big important issue with an employee, and you find a way to solve it with them. And actually, in the most intense situations, that can even mean the person agreeing that they're not right for the job. If they can't do the thing with a certain amount of flexibility and speed or whatever, and avoid that. So I think ultimately that'd be one route. I used to talk at the 80% rule and say, for our business to succeed, we need to get it right 80% of the time. Now, perfectionists hate that. They hate it, but it's often true, But I think having very direct conversations, carefully handled conversations with people as to why that's the case and why you've raised it and what the implications are if we can't solve it, either for them or for the business or both, I think that's the way I'd handle it as best. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay. Any others?
No, that's all for now. Let's move on to the next question. The next frame.
Actually, this one flows on nicely anyway to delegation and teams. Delegation. The reason this one made it is because it's such an important thing. Delegate in any hierarchical business, and most businesses have some form of levels. The idea is obviously the least expensive person does as many tasks as they can. It's more efficient that way. It's the whole thinking, but only if you can delegate effectively. And I found that a lot of managers struggle with this. Even very, very senior people have said when they've read a draft of my book, a pre-release copy, saying they've always struggled with delegation. And I noticed there were no, a lot of these things have existing frameworks out there, which I've probably distilled and in some cases hopefully improved, but I couldn't find one for delegation, not a sort of an acronym or a way of a mnemonic. So I came up with one. So I've called it the pouch. I've even, embarrassingly, I wrote a very short story about a baron from the Middle Ages who delegated an important task to a knight, one of his knights, because he was in debt to another baron and he needed to repay it with a delegation pouch of gold. Oh dear. Okay. You get the drift, okay?
Yeah.
You'll be pleased to hear, Rahul, and your audience. That didn't make it into the book, but I may resurrect the story on LinkedIn at some point. But the framework did. The framework is basically pouch. You think about a pouch of gold, and it's an important thing. You're entrusting it to someone else, but you won't have control of it after that, or you shouldn't. So the idea is you need a POUCH preparation, and preparation essentially means figuring out who is the right person to delegate to, and what will they need, what resources, what information, what briefing and information, resources, what access, etc. think of that before you even approach the person.
Right.
That's quite useful. Then after that, I guess the key trick here is that you explain to the person what the desired outcome is, what the outcomes are.
Right.
Yeah, rather than, I'm sure you've come across this, rather than telling them exactly how to do it. It's up to them how they do it with the resources and information you've given them, but it's the outcome that you're effectively asking them to achieve, not telling them what they're going to do. That's much more empowering, and it helps initiative, etc. Then you've got a couple of checks. You've got the understanding check and the commitment check. Understanding check means, making sure they know exactly what they need to do. Yeah.
Right.
And often asking people to play it back is a really good way of doing that, and then you can clarify. And then the commitment check is slightly different, which is, how sure are you that you will deliver this on time? And if they aren't committed, you then need to keep going and discussing with them why and what would make it a 10 out of 10. I definitely will commit. And actually, back to that question about an employee who is perhaps paying too much attention to detail and missing deadlines. Well, the commitment would be the outcome by the deadline. And if they say, I can't commit to it because I might have to rerun it again and again just to double check, you would talk to them about, well, that's not satisfactory because we need the outcome. And you keep talking, well, what would have to change? So you could do that. And they go, well, I guess I could just trust that my colleague has got it right. Okay, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
And then the final one is help, as in the manager can help, but the good practice is only to help if asked for help. Yeah, so always be available to step in and help, and encourage it if there's a problem. As in the outcome may not be achieved, and therefore, but don't proactively go and interfere, during the process.
Right.
And that is a very well documented success formula, but this is like an acronym and an actual process for it.
It's actually quite useful. I can already relate to it, and I can already relate to the earlier days of my delegation where I faced a lot of issues because it wasn't there. So what do you recommend? Like in the previous framework, you had your recommendation was that you actually should sit down with your team and you should document the different aspects of the team. When it comes to delegation, how much of it do you recommend documenting? Or
very little, if any. Wow.
Right.
I haven't thought about that before, because I always see this as a bit of preparation as the manager beforehand. Then it's literally a meeting or a conversation, or I suppose at worse an exchange of this really ought to be a face-to-face or a person-to-person. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And it's just a meeting, and that's it. I mean, I guess the bit I'm just thinking about it now as you ask. I personally would want to document the outcome, as in clarify at the end of it. So, such and such. Thank you for just to clarify. We agreed that the outcome is by this deadline. Almost that.
Right.
And that's it. That's it. I would say.
Makes sense. Okay, so we don't have any further questions on this framework. So let's move on to the next one.
I'll move on to the next one. Okay. Oh yeah, running an effective meeting. Again, the reason this one is in one of my top 10 sort of favorite ones to take you through today is that I've heard a lot of businesses talk about the meetings in their organization are really poorly run or even unnecessary. This seems to be almost like I was going to say a pandemic, but that doesn't feel an appropriate word these days. It's a business problem. Why it's a business problem.
Yeah.
And again, there are one or two. There's definitely some thinking out there, and I've come up with. I've distilled it into a couple of I think the most important ones. I'm not going to talk about sport now, unless people want to. But there's a framework up in the left as a reminder to me that there is an important way of setting up meetings. And I would impose this, by the way, as a rule in any business of mine, if I had, run a big team or a business in future, that you must have a sport, let's say, for every meeting. Yeah. And it ensures that the meeting is necessary, that people are well prepared, that you will get to the outcome you want, et cetera, et cetera. I can go through that in a minute if people ask me to, but I wanted to focus more on, what happens in the actual meeting so you have a successful outcome. Okay. And I really quite like this. And notice the drawing is a meeting where it's all symmetrical, but
Right.
there is a sort of a first amongst equal, which is the chair of the meeting.
Right.
And you should always have a chair of the meeting, a designated chair. If you come to a meeting, no one's chairing it, you say, "Oh, can I start this meeting? Can I suggest that we start this meeting by deciding who's going to chair it, please?" and normally it'll be you who gets nominated because you've obviously got the most, gumption. Anyway, so what happens is this process I absolutely love, which is the chair starts out by just explaining the context of the meeting, why are we here, and what outcome do we want by the end of the meeting.
Right.
Vital. Write it down on a flip or on a chat, thing. In fact, the outcome should already be in the sport, by the way. That's what the O is. So everyone knew in advance. This is just to clarify. So that's number one. Number two is the people who've been asked in advance to share relevant information, take people through things, should be asked to do that now. And it's whoever's appropriate. And again, that'll be specified in the introduction, in the setup of the meeting, the invitation. Sometimes that can be done all by pre-reading, obviously, but often it's useful to refresh people or take people through latest things, etc. Then, number three is essential if you want inclusivity in your meetings and your business, and that is after the information has been shared, you ask everyone in turn to express their point of view on the matter, and without challenge. So if someone starts to interrupt or say that sounds or undermine what the person has said, it's the chair's job to remind them of the protocol and say, "Oh, hang on, you'll have your say in a minute," kind of thing. Yeah. And that's really important because obviously number three means that even the quietest, most reserved people in the room are given the opportunity to express their thoughts, which we know is very, very important for good decisions and balanced decisions as well.
Right.
Okay. Number four is like what actually tends to happen in most real current business meetings, is that people can then have a healthy debate, a proper discussion and, debating the issues that have come out. Okay. So and then the 5 and 6 is just good practice, which is that, towards the end of the meeting, if a consensus has been reached, great, easy. If it hasn't, the chair needs to actually say, well, I've listened to the arguments, I've listened to everyone's point of view. We've got to make a decision on this. The decision is going to be this, and for the following reasons. Mm-hmm. And then that's the matter's done, kind of thing. That might vary a bit by culture, by the way. I think that might have to vary a little bit by culture, but this might be a little bit Western biased. I'm just being honest with you here. And then number 6 is capturing who, what, and when. As in, always capture who, what, and when the action plan, even if it's just one bullet, one thing. Always do that. Now that I guarantee, if you use that and that's deemed to be the way you do it, and you put one of these up in your meeting room on a laminate or something, you will improve your meetings. I'm convinced.
This makes a lot of sense, and there's an issue which I have encountered in the past, and this is something which I learned by talking to some of the attendees of the meeting, and especially the ones who are junior. And what would happen is that even if they are in a room, if the seniors are the ones who do the talking up front, then they kind of start withholding their views and coming out openly. So while the attendees should be given a chance to express their views without being challenged, then should it also be that it be done in a certain order?
You've done that, you see. And this always happens with these kind of interactive meetings. You always learn something new. And I now want to change the book. It's being printed, by the way. I can't. But not change. I want to do it as a little build because, yes, that's an absolutely brilliant point. By the way, in the cultural differences, another one I was going to mention was that, again, there's a big kind of broadly east-west difference in that, especially in America, actually, everyone is expected to voice their say, and the junior people have no problem expressing something if it's,
Correct.
But again, I've read a lot about how that is not expected, or it would be surprising for that to happen. So yes, I what I'm trying to say is I absolutely agree that a build on number 3 should be, a good practice is to perhaps start with the least experienced or the, next person moving up to the most senior.
Nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really good. And I do notice that obviously sometimes the chair, by the way, should also express their opinion. But yeah, that should always come last. I wish I'd reflected on that a bit more. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, number 5, the chair, kind of they to go last and they express their view, and part of that might be to agree with everyone else or to challenge. Yeah.
So in fact, recently I was reading this book called Working Backwards. It's a book on the processes that were used for Amazon to scale up. And it's written by 2 of the ex-Amazon employees, VPs. And they cover the whole meeting process in a lot of detail.
Right.
And like we've heard the usual things already, like, they don't use PowerPoints, they use Word files, and then there is a 6-page limit and the reason behind it and all that. But I pretty much see all of the things which you have covered being there in that document, in that, in the way they would run their meetings. But yeah, there are a couple of things which are starkly different, which is that there is an absolute ban on PowerPoint when it comes to Amazon. Not sure if you have any personal thoughts on it. If you have, then maybe you can share.
In the relevant information shared area sort of thing, how you actually share it. Yeah, I don't express any preference one way or another, or rules for or against it. I mean, my overall advice would be extremely succinct, because a lot of people will never read it. Well, a lot of people don't read them anyway, and I think that's a problem, and I'm sure that comes up in the Amazon thing as to why. And again, that can be a protocol, which is if there's pre-reading, which it's part of the sport process, by the way. You will be expected to have read it. You can't get away with not. But then that only works if there's a maximum time length. So I personally wouldn't say whether it should be PowerPoint or Word necessarily, but I would certainly say it has to be extremely succinct. It's a summary, it's not a lazy kind of dump of all the data kind of thing. It's the opposite. Right. That's a nice build, actually.
Awesome.
And I do like the idea of Word, because Word implies you've had to make it cogent, sentences and thoughts rather than images. And I'm not quite sure what it actually is saying. Yeah.
In fact, there's a lot of study which has been done on the different formats and the benefit of having one against the other. Awesome. So we don't have any further questions on this framework, so maybe we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, right. So this again takes me back. Now, I was this was a little bit later in my career, I guess 40s at some point. I was required to create a communications plan, for quite a big deal. It was actually a company restructure, and it was a fairly large, a very large unit. And we at the time did not need or want or had time to bring in an external expert for it. So it was very daunting, indeed. So again, this is when I kind of learned about how to go about it, and actually there wasn't a lot available at that time that I could find that was really directly about how to do this kind of thing. But I did know a lot because of my market research, marketing career, about planning advertising campaigns. So I used that a bit of as a starting point. And actually, it turns out I think there are a lot of parallels, indeed. Not surprisingly, because you're communicating to sets of people effectively. But so anyway, let me take you through, and this is again one of my absolute favorites. Now, it's one of those frameworks where you kind of have to really stick to the rules. You have to go through the process, and in this case, going from top to bottom, and you have to do each row, before you go on to the row below. But you absolutely start with who do we need to influence? Who do we need to communicate to and influence who? And in terms of who, as in that case, obviously you've got very different types of who. You have sort of people who own the company above you that you'll need to engage with about your plans. You'll have people at your kind of manager level who will need to do a lot of the rolling out of the plans, and then you'll have end employees who are going to be affected as well. So lots of different types of sub-audience. So you start with that, and you make sure you're clear on those audiences first. Then you go on to, okay, what do we actually want for each audience separately to start with anyway, separately to start with. What do you actually want them to do? And I find that often this is skipped when people are thinking about a communications plan. They skip, in fact, they go straight from who, sometimes, or not even who, but they skip straight to what are we going to show them down at the bottom somewhere. Anyway, but if you go through the do level and then okay, in order for them to do that, what do you think? What do we think they need to think and feel, and what do they need to know? And I found if you just spend time on the who, the do, think, and feel until it is crystal clear before you do the rest of it below, you will end up with a much more effective communications plan. And it's actually quite hard to do. I find in meetings you have to be the chair has to be very strict and say, no, hang on, can we not jump ahead to the see and hear yet? Can we still focus on the doing, whatever level you're on? Does that make sense to you, Raoul?
Yeah. No, so this is quite interesting. Tell me, what was the actual implementation process like? Like, if you could just elaborate a little bit, like, was it working with a team, and what was the complexity that you were trying to exactly resolve? What kind of challenges were you facing?
Yeah, so this was a company restructure. So this was like changing people's the units that existed, and therefore who the leaders were of those units. Who the people were who weren't going to be leaders, and what will they be going to do? Will they be leaving the company or not? There was also different ways of working. So actual approaching some roles changed. Certain roles were changed, certain roles were new, certain roles disappeared. It was a big deal. So there was an awful lot of different complex strands to what needed to be said and shown to who, and in what order. So although this is your first cut, right, this diagram in the middle of the slide, and then you go, okay, what do they need to see? What do we need to tell them, hear? What do they need to experience? Sometimes you need to kind of demo something, get people to try something before they believe it and feel it, hands-on experience, etc. Then once you've got that, then you go, okay, well, how are we going to do this? Who's going to be preparing that kind of communication, when and where? And so I've included also a process and a template, that's what's in the bottom right as a reminder, to help you actually figure out the time plan, the order in which things need to happen, whether or not certain communications will work for actually more than one audience, etc., etc. There's quite a lot of detail actually in the book about going from the thinking about the kind of high-level messaging and motivations, which is on the left, and then the detailed kind of rollout plan on the right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I wish I had this when I went through that one, but it was useful when I had to go through it the next time.
Awesome. So we are almost at the 1 hour mark. Like, there's 5 minutes to go. But I really wish to cover as much as you can out of those 10 frameworks. So how about we do this for the last couple of minutes? Maybe you pick the 2 that are that you are really passionate about, which have personally helped you, and maybe you elaborate on those.
Oh, it's like choosing your favorite child. It's quite difficult. Yeah, no, I tell you what, I'd like to do this next one quickly then, developing your story. Because I think it's such a fundamental one. If people have not come across what I think it's called, I've looked it up actually to remember the original name. It's the Minto pyramid. Yeah. So Barbara Minto, which was the first hire at McKinsey's at an MBA hire, who was a woman. In the mid-80s, she came up with this framework, and it is genius, and I use it for starting point, at least, for every presentation I do. So if you haven't come across the Minto pyramid, you basically say you need a good presentation will have one clear overarching message. It will be supported by 3 supporting messages. No more, no less than 3. Some people say 4, but I'm a strong believer that 3 is better, definitely better. And then for each supporting message, you actually ideally pick out 3 specific points that argue for message A, for example. And that's where you bring in variety. You want facts there, you want images, you want a bit of variety down there. But if you use that and then decide, all you need to do basically is decide whether A, B, or C comes first, 1, 2, or 3, to juggle the order of A, B, and C around. And you've got effectively the core of your presentation structure. It works. I've used this hundreds of times, and it always makes my presentations better, I promise you. So I just wanted to passionately share that in just 1 minute.
Yeah, I absolutely relate to this one. So
yeah, do you? Yeah.
totally on board with it.
It is like, it's popular. I think it's still gaining popularity, even though it's been around since the 80s.
Yes.
I can see why. I've yet to. There are advanced versions. Very advanced presenters can do something cleverer, but you know, as a starting point, absolutely. Now, obviously, telling your story. I mean, this is a passion for me, of course it is, because it's like this is me. I mean, you know, when you're presenting, I always think of it as, I put it as a formula. It's you and how you interact with your audience, but it's you squared. It's you, but slightly more than you. Like when I'm presenting now, this is me, but I'm a little bit more, you know, more I'm me squared. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And that multiplied by the clarity, the persuasiveness and relevance of your story, but also how you illustrate your story. And then it's undermined or divided by how much jargon and waffle you put in along the way. And I always struggled. I used to put in too much waffle, and apologies if I have done today. So that's what I think great presentation is. And obviously, I love all the sort of variety of the ways you can show things, the videos, the graphs. There's a whole section on graphs in the book because I'm a bit of a nerd about graphs. These quotes, clips. It's just a little checklist there. And obviously, a little amusing anecdote here. You see this one, it's just a few ideas for how to make your slides, your visuals strong if you are using PowerPoint or something similar. Can you see that? Well, can you read the text at the very bottom?
Make sure text will be more readable.
In other words, you can read it, right? Now, the irony is, when I sent this to publishers, they deleted that bottom there because they thought I was telling them to make sure that the text was. I said, no, put it back. And I said, but it's too small. Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
They promised me that when the printed copy arrives, right, that it will be just readable. Just. not people my age and older, but not, you know, with the short long-sightedness. But anyway, whatever. Get your glasses out. Anyway, I won't go through these, but you know, there are loads of tips and tricks in the book about how to make presentations strong and powerful. I don't think we need to talk around about workshops because, it's another whole topic. Basically, if you've become a proficient presenter in a lot of businesses, you're kind of expected to jump to the next level, which is to devise and run a workshop. But it's a huge leap, and there are different skills and tricks that you need to know. So again, the section in the book is like a beginner's guide to workshops. I take you through the key principles of what a workshop's all about, and also down there's a reminder that we've got this foolproof co-creation exercise. It's quick, it's easy. You can even run it in a team meeting. It doesn't have to be a full workshop. It works every time. So I find that useful. And okay, we might as well go for it because this is the 10th one. Yeah. Okay. It's almost the best. Okay, in 30 seconds, if you haven't come across this framework, the GROW framework, it's not like a coaching framework that you need to be a qualified coach. It's just a way of coaching individuals, and anyone can do it. All you need to do is be good at listening skills, and then basically probe and ask the person you're trying to coach the 4 things. What are you trying to achieve? What does success look like? The people use that phrase. What's your goal? What are you trying to do here? Make sure they're clear on it. Then you ask them, okay, where are you now? What's the reality? How does it differ from what your goal is? What's the gap?
Right.
How far is it? What's the difference? What's different from that to here? Because then that really crystallizes. Already you start to think, well, I know what I need to do, which leads you to then probing the person, asking, well, what options? What could you do to go from reality to your goal? And often they'll say, well, I suppose I could do this, or I could even do this, or I could do that. Yeah. And they're starting to think about it in their heads. And then eventually you just need to ask them, well, which one will you do? And they'll go, well, I don't know. So, eventually they'll go, well, I need to do this. It becomes obvious to them almost always what they actually have to do from just talking through the goal, the reality, and the options. It is genius. You don't, as the manager or coach, you don't need to know the subject matter at all. You just need to be a good listener and probe and listen and probe. Okay, I know it was very quick at the end there, but we did get through all 10.
Wonderful. Awesome. So thanks a ton, Dan. This was lovely. I'm glad we are exactly at the 1 hour mark, and I'm glad we managed to cover all of them. So thanks a ton. I'm going to remove the slides from the screen for now. Okay. Yeah. So lovely. Couple of things like, when is your book expected to be available, and, what else should people be expecting, once they get their
Okay.
hands-on?
Yeah. That's unlike last time. Things are a little bit more settled down. The pandemic has had less impact, so no signs of delay this time, or supply shortages like last time.
Right.
Because of demand, obviously, but it's due out on the 31st from Amazon and from Book Depository and various others actually, and that's global on Book Depository, and it's most countries or a lot of countries on Amazon, but Book Depository is slightly better globally. The US Amazon is a bit later, but people in the US can still get it from Book Depository, from the end of this month, basically. So very soon, 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah. I'm hoping that people will find it useful. Please do pre-order it, because if you get some pre-orders on Amazon, that determines a lot of the fate of your book when it actually does launch, apparently. And I guess if just like with all these things, the best form of communication, if you like it, please tell a few people. I'm hoping it'll be beyond the marketing community, because this is relevant to most professions, most careers, people who work with people, kind of thing. So anyway, fingers crossed. And by the way, thank you so much for the opportunity again to talk to your audience.
Yes, it was lovely having you on the show. Just a quick clarification: if people want to get access to the frameworks that you shared today, and maybe mull over it a little more in detail, and maybe use those beautiful illustrations, the next time they are sharing it with someone, the copy of the presentation will be available, or
absolutely not? Yeah, to you via your, yes, I'm happy to. Obviously we've got the recording, but I'm happy to distribute the actual document itself to anyone who's interested. No problem. You can contact me. I'm Dan. I can't remember. Well, I'm obviously Dan White on LinkedIn, but I'm Dan White, author of the Smart Marketing book. I'm that Dan White. And happy to connect with people on there about anything that they've heard in the book. There's also a lot of the some of the general business frameworks, not so much from this book. In fact, none of these ones will be available online on my website yet, but on the marketing and business sort of side, a lot of them are on smartmarketing.me, so www.smartmarketing.me. In fact, there's a lot of psychological stuff and interesting stuff on there. These ones won't be. I may launch something next year with some of these online, but not yet.
Awesome. Okay. So for the audience, give me a day or two, to receive the document from Dan, and I'll upload it on my website, and I'll put a link under the video for anyone who wants to download today's presentation. And there's also the previous presentation which Dan had shared, where he shared 10 smart marketing frameworks, and that presentation is also available on my website along with that for download, so if you all want to download. So on that note, thanks a ton, Mark. You're the first speaker to make the second appearance, so I'm extremely thankful to you. And it was lovely having you on the show once again, and looking forward to maybe you becoming a serial book author, and probably inviting you once again on the show at a future date. So thanks everyone who's watching, and if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do that. You can go and rewatch the different frameworks. You can download the frameworks from my website. You can watch a lot of other live streams. This was the 18th live stream, so there are a ton of other live stream recordings which are there on the YouTube channel, so you can watch the previous recordings and you can learn a lot. So on that note, thank you everyone. Thank you, Dan, and I'll see you again in a couple of weekends. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.